we're at George's garage.
I'm George.
And that's George. George has had the car. You've had the car since June, right? I think.
Actually, I think we started on the project April of last year.
Yeah, because we started with the electric drive motor.
Exactly.
And then if that wasn't going to be in good shape, the rest of it was kind of pointless.
We were going to call it at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we got the car over summertime.
Yeah, we got the car here, and then we decided to take the components out, the major drive components out, evaluate them, see if they're going to be rebuildable, and then if they were, we're going to put them back together, and then see if the electronics in the car were going to coincide with it.
Right. So George is being very humble. He's the electrical wizard. He's the one that's figured all of this out. You did have some paperwork, but...
We did have a lot of paperwork, actually. Fortunately, we had the paperwork we did, because without the schematics that the original engineer had, I wouldn't have been able to put this car back together. So it was very, very fortunate we have as much information as we do with this car.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's about 3 thick phone books worth of information.
Yes.
So as far as documentation goes and provenance, not just for the sake of putting it back together, but having all those internal letters between General Electric and LaDawri and everything.
Yeah, we even have the personal journal of Ed Klotolowicz, as far as his journal when he did this car, actually, as he went along through the process of making it, which is very interesting to see the trials and tribulations he went through to make this car.
Yeah, over the course of about 3-4 years, I think.
I think it was, about 3 to 4 years.
This is where everything really happens. So George, run me through the way this thing works, because it's very complicated.
So this is a very unique system, and it's actually amazing that this thing was put together the way it was, because it's totally not automotive. This is basically a circuit board on wheels with a drive generator, a gasoline powered generator, a clutch assembly, and a drive motor that actually propels the car. What it does is the big large gray generator in the back is used as a power supply source, as a variable power supply source. So as you need more power to accelerate the vehicle, it supplies it to the drive motor at variable speeds. So that's what gives you your horsepower and your torque out of the drive motor. Your electronics comes out of the truckodyne motor. Gives you seamless electronics between the drive and the pedal. In between the drive motor and the gasoline engine, there's a 9.5 horsepower Briggs & Stratton engine in there that was specifically built for this car. In between is a clutch assembly that connects the engine to the generator assembly. When you start the engine, it will run the generator, which will then recharge the batteries. Charge time, we're not quite sure how long that's going to take yet, but it's designed to charge over a slow period of time.
All right. Now remind me, we have in the clutch pack 3 phenolic discs, one of which you found was broken?
Cracked and broken, actually, in two pieces. Was able to get it back together, and it's actually functioning perfectly right now.
Great.
It's driven by, there's a circuit board here that has what's called contactors, relays, switches, and they're all driven by the inside of the car. There's the contact set up front that we're going to show you that dictates what connects, what turns on, what turns off, and gives you all the functions of the car.
One of the things I thought we were kind of lucky was that every single wire that goes into that panel has a number, and then that number corresponds at the other end. So
and that helped tremendously.
It could have been even more of a challenge otherwise.
Yes, yep, for sure. Not the most comfortable car.
Yeah. Well, you're kind of challenged with the way it's mounted on the chassis.
At someday, in point in time, would if you went to an upholstery guy, if you could make some really.
Oh, I plan to.
Nice seats.
Yeah, I've got an upholstery guy. I'm going to take that too, and I'm going to have it do. I'm going to do red with a tuck and roll and see if he can. Yeah. I think black exterior, red interior, and then maybe some silver somewhere just to pick up on the GE colors. Yeah. All right. So here we are in the cockpit, which is where even more of the action occurs. So we've got very atypical gauges. Again, not what you'd expect in most cars, including this egg timer. GE logo in the steering wheel, they put that in there, which was a nice little addition. And then this is where all of our drive functions occur, right? So Run me through the process here.
Okay, so we figured out how this car was designed to operate, and there's a number of there's letters on each one of these buttons. We start with an F, we have an R, we have an N, and a C. Assuming that those were automotive terms, but they're not. The N is the initial startup of the Truckodyne. So if we were to press this button, this starts the Truckodyne working, and then from there we decide what function the car has to do, whether it's charge the battery, forward or reverse. So if we were to start this Truckodyne and we hit the charge button and start the gasoline engine, it will then charge the batteries.
Let's get a shot of that push button start.
So the push button is up here. This is the Truckodyne. This is the charge, and this is the starter for the gasoline engine.
All right.
Once the Truckodyne button is pressed, you can press the drive or the reverse button, and pressing the gas pedal will then energize the drive motor.
Very similar to modern electric cars.
Very similar.
Except this was 1958, 1959.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, so now we're up front where there's still exciting things that happen, but not so complicated compared to the rear, although a fair amount of complications. In addition to the fantastic amount of paperwork, we have really cool things like this directly from General Electric. They made their own ID badge, gave it a VIN, which is how the car is actually officially registered. And I don't think you can ask for a better plate on a car like this. Advanced Projects and Laboratories Operations, 1960 General Electric at their Erie, Pennsylvania plant. So that is pretty neat. Very glad that's still with the car. Very happy with the family having been really good stewards of this car after Edwin had kind of parked it up and then had passed away. So, George, obviously batteries here at the center of the tray. Talk to us about how they're tied together, and let's go through some of the interesting components we have under the hood here.
Sure. Once again, after going through Edwin's blueprints and diagrams, it was very unclear as to the actual voltage that this car was going to perform at. After a lot of paperwork and going through a bunch of his notes, it was determined that we were going to run a 48-volt system. So in doing so, we decided that we're going to run 1,000 amp hours, which would be the 4 batteries, deep cycle batteries in series for 48 volts. That 48 volts is all transformed in the underside of the car, where there's a large rectifier that will transform a lot of the Truckodyne's output power to the batteries to charge them back, and then back again to the drive motor.
Well, speaking about the rectifier, let me crawl under here real quick and show the good folks that. It's right under the driver's seat, right?
Yep.
Okay. There's the rectifier.
So there's your rectifier.
Very cool.
Big heat sinks. Those are large copper heat sinks to cool them down because there's a lot of heat that's produced through them. You have 0 gauge wire that's powering this car from front to back. Very, very heavily built vehicle as far as the electronics. They've definitely built it heavy duty.
While we're down here, why don't you throw your flashlight at the back of that? So I thought this was pretty neat because they've got the Truckodyne and the gas motor on its own subframe mounted between the chassis rails. You can just drop out.
Right. It's 4 bolts will hold that whole assembly in and drop right out as one unit.
Nothing on this car is built small. It's all overbuilt, which is great. Okay, so back to the front.
So back up here, what gives you the forward and reverse speeds come from 2 potentiometers. And what was unique about what Mr. Kolotoloritz did is he put them in reverse of each other. So you were getting a smooth acceleration and deceleration in both directions, which they didn't know at that time how to accomplish that problem, and they designed this specifically for this car, and it works flawlessly. You have your 2 potentiometers. We've got a horn here, actually, nice tooting horn, and then you have this electronic gadget, which is actually a resistor, a large resistor, and it's a variable resistor which has an adjustable tap on it, so you can change the amount of voltage he was able to get out of this from the 48 volts down to 24 volts, which half of the system works on 24 volts, half of the system works on 48 volts. And unlike automotive wiring, this is a floating ground system, which means that the ground can be used for anything and everything on the car. Unusual, because automotive is the complete opposite. So he designed it very well, very complicated, but it does work perfectly.
We're going to go through the processes here, right? So we start with our toggle switch, right?
Correct.
Okay, toggle, power, and then neutral.
Neutral. Get it started. You got the Trumpadine running right now.
Okay. We try the charge function. So charge,
Press charge.
start.
Press the gasoline engine. Hold it. There's the gasoline engine running. Okay. And then press
Forward.
forward. And press it down. Okay. The axle is jumping around.
Sure is different.
I think yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Of course,
My buddy goes, you know what you should do, George, as a prank? Put a T, the Tesla T on the front of the thing. I'm like, yeah.
and of course, with it being built by General Electric, it's got General Electric headlights. From what I'm told, which I have no way of confirming and I have no reason to doubt, the damage on the nose here occurred when the president of General Electric at the time came to the Erie, Pennsylvania plant to give this a test ride after years of the engineering team putting it together, and misjudged where the entry to the building was and gave it a whack on the nose. Which is even funnier because with all of the correspondence we have between General Electric and LaDawri when they were ordering the car, we know that General Electric ordered the car with nerfing bars originally, which never arrived. And we actually have a letter from LaDawri following up, effectively saying that their welding department was incredibly behind at the time and they were best suited just to source nerfing bars locally. So you can kind of imagine having that in the back of your mind, working on this thing for years and years, the president of your company shows up and then whacks the front of the building, and you kind of think, damn, if only we got those nerfing bars. It was kind of funny to imagine that that's how it went down, and actually knowing that that's probably the mindset they were in because we have all that documentation. So again, we're at the back here, which is where all of the interesting stuff happens. George is getting this more and more dialed in. This car would absolutely not be running if it wasn't for George, because I would have no idea what I'm doing on this. So very thankful to have George working on this. My skill set was used up very quickly when I started working on this. My major contribution, in addition to buying this thing and documenting it as best as I could, was dropping that gas tank, draining it, and having the inside realigned. After that, everything else was well past my set of skills, because this thing is just a completely different animal of a vehicle. So we'll get a shot of it underneath here. And it's not painted, it's a black gel coat. LaDawri's standard was to ship bodies in black gel coat, although they did take custom orders and you could have it done in other colors, like say green, red, whatever. Probably a good base for somebody's future paint job. But this one was just shipped in the black gel coat and never painted, because it was just a factory experimental test mule. Oh my God. it stops. That's amazing. You've officially put more miles on it than anybody has since 1961.
Hey, we did it.
Well, you did it. I just dropped it off.
You're part of it, man.